All right, algebra students, welcome back here. So like I've said, I've gone for a few days here, so we are getting ready for topic 2 to begin. And to get ready for topic 2, we're just doing a little bit of review lessons here to help us get ready for that. All right, so here we got 2-1b today. All right, this should be another review from 8th grade math, pre-algebra, intro to algebra, whatever class you took. So here's the concepts we're reviewing today. Okay, so we're going to graph a line. When given the slope and y-intercept of that line, we'll talk about what those are. We're also going to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. We'll take a look at that. And then we're also going to be graphing a line once we know what the slope-intercept form is. Okay, so let's dive in here. We'll take a look at these concepts. Okay, so the first thing we can graph a line if we know some pieces of information about the line. Okay, so if we know what the slope is and what the y-intercept is, then we can go about and cross that line. Okay, so first of all, our slope, we already figured that out. That is how steep a line is. All right, and then our y-intercept, this y, I don't know the reason it's there, but it should be right there because there's our y-axis. Okay, our y-intercept would be where on the y-axis does our line cross it at. Okay, so down here we got our x-axis, up here we have our y-axis. We want to know where on the y-axis is it going to cross. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, step number 1 here, okay, your y-intercept is at 4, so we're going to put a point at 0, 4. Okay, so that means on your y-axis, okay, so right here on the y-axis, we are crossing, our line is crossing that y-axis right there at 4. Okay, so we're going to put a dot there at 4 on the y-axis, and that would be called our y-intercept. That is where our line is going to cross the y-axis. Okay, and then from that point, we just want to follow what our slope is to be able to find the next points for that line. Okay, so right here, step number 2, because our slope is negative 2/5, okay, what we're going to do from our point is we're going to go 2 units down, and we're going to go 5 units to the right, okay, because for it to be a negative slope, all right, we want to make sure our line is going to be pointing to the left when we draw it. Okay, so to do that, starting from this point there, we're going to go down 2 places, so 1, 2, and we're going to go over to the right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is going to be our next point. Okay, and we can do that one more time. So from this point here, we can go down 2 spaces to there, and then we can go over 5 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's our next point. Okay, now see where those points are lined up. It is making a nice straight, it's going to make a nice straight line for us. So now that we got that, we're going to draw our line that's going to go through those 2 points. We actually made 3 points, which is a little better to do. Okay, so make 3 points just to make sure you're graphing it right. Okay, so our line is going to look like that right there. We're going to extend it off the graph because our line doesn't stop at the points. It actually keeps on going. Okay, so take a look. There's our line. It's pointing to the left there. So it's making a negative slope. So we know we got it right. Okay, let's take a look at some other examples. Okay, so again, we can graph a line as long as we know what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. Okay, so our y-intercept is where our line crosses the y-axis. All right, so that's where we want to start from. So step number 1 is to use the y-intercept, okay, so that -3. So on the y-axis, we are crossing it at -3. Okay, so that's where we're going to put our first point. Okay, and then our slope, if you take a look at our slope here, we only have the number 2. Okay, which is kind of odd because our slope needs to be in a fraction. It needs to be the rise on top and then the run on the bottom. Okay, so for any slope that's a whole number, we're just going to turn it into a fraction by throwing a 1 underneath of it. Okay, and then we have our slope. So we're going to be going up to over 1 from our point. All right, and it's positive, so our line should be pointing to the right side because we want it to be positive. So we'll just follow these directions here. We're going to count 2 units up and 1 to the right to put down our next point. Okay, so from this point here, we'd be going up 2 over 1. So there's our next point. Okay, and we can do one more. So from this last point we just drew, we can go up 2 over 1, and there would be our next one. Okay, now that we got those points where they need to go, we can go ahead and connect them with a nice straight line. So we'll go up like that, and then down that way, and beautiful. Look at that. It turned out great. So there would be what that line would look like on a graph if we use the y-intercept and we use the slope. All right. Try this one on your own. See what you guys can come up with. You're given the y-intercept. You're given the slope. First, start by putting the y-intercept. Put that point on the graph where it would go, and then use your slope to guide you for where your line is going to go and where your points are going to show up at. All right, you can pause the video, work this out, and then we'll take a look at what you came up with. All right, let's check this out and see what you guys got. Okay, so there is our y-intercept right there, a positive 1. This has a negative slope, so it should be pointing to the left, which the line does. All right, so from each point, I'll show you what I did. You could go down 2 and then to the right 3. You could also go up 2 and then you could go to the left 3. Okay, so either way would get you where your line would go, and it would make it go in a negative direction. All right. Okay, and every single equation out there, or every single line that is out there, it has a math problem, a math equation that describes what that line is doing. Okay, and that equation we use is this one right here. All right, it is called the slope-intercept form of a line. All right, and what it does, it has a couple of key pieces of information. This number that's at the very end is your number that represents your y-intercept. Okay, so that whatever your y-intercept is, that is where that number would go. Okay, and then your slope is your number that is right here with x. All right, there's that m like we were looking at the other day, the letter for the slope. All right, and then this y and this x, it just stays a y and an x. Okay, it doesn't really change. We're only concerned about filling in the numbers for the y-intercept and filling in the numbers for the slope. All right, so if we have the slope and the y-intercept, we can write the equation for a line. That's all the information that we need. Okay, because our y-intercept goes in for our letter b, and our slope goes in for the letter m. So we just would simply take these numbers and put them into our equation and replace them with the letters m and b. Okay, so if we do that, it would look like this. Y stays the same. We'd put our equal sign. We're going to put 1/4 next to x. And because it is a positive 4, we're going to go plus 4 for the y-intercept. Okay, so this would be the equation that would match that line. Okay, it doesn't mean a lot to us right now, but we're going to be working with it in the lessons to come here. But this is basically the math that would create that line on a graph. Okay, that's really what it means. There's the math that makes that line happen. Whatever that line looks like, that's the math that's going to create that line. All right, so let's practice writing some equations in slope-intercept form using the information we're given. Okay, so here's the next one we got. We have a slope of -9, so that would be our m. We have a y-intercept of b, so we just really want to put those numbers into this equation where they would go, leave the y and leave the x alone. Okay, so if we replace m and b with the numbers we're given, we would have y equals -9, and we don't need to make -9 a fraction. Since we're not going to graph it right now, we can just leave it as -9. Okay, so -9 with an x, and then our b is +6, so we'll just put down +6. All right, and that equation, that is just the math that represents what that line would look like on a graph. All right, it just tells people what that line would do. Okay. Sometimes we got to look at an actual line that's on a graph itself, and then we can take the information for that line and we can write the equation that would match it. Okay, so we need two things to make that happen. We need the slope. Okay, so we need to figure out what the slope of that line is, and we need the y-intercept. Okay, we need to figure out what the y-intercept is. All right, the y-intercept is the easier one. Okay, so take a look. Here's your y-axis. So the spot you are crossing the y-axis is right there at +3. Okay, so that's where your line crosses the y-axis. So there's your y-intercept. So I'm just going to put a 3 right there. Okay, so I can get ready to build my equation. Okay, and then now you just need to figure out the slope. Okay, and for the slope, I could actually figure out my rise and my run to get from one point to the next. Okay, so I have a rise of 1 and I have a run of 2. All right, remember your slope is always rise over top of run. Okay, so my rise and run, I have a rise of 1, a run of 2, and there would be my slope. All right, and it's positive because my line is pointing to the right, so my slope would be 1/2. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this and clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to write y equals, I'm going to put 1/2 in the place for m, put the x next to it, and because it's a +3, I'm going to write +3. Okay, so there's my equation that matches what this line does on a graph. Okay, that's the math behind what makes that line appear onto the graph. All right, try one out on your own. You got this line on a graph. Do the two things we just did, figure out what the slope of that line is, and then also find out what is the y-intercept of that line. Okay, get those pieces of information, and then you're able to write the equation for it. See how that goes? Pause the video, and we'll check your answers here in just a minute. Okay, let's take a look and see what you guys got for this. Okay, so the y-intercept occurs right at +1, so that's where the 1 would go in the place for b. And my slope is it's pointing to the right, so it's going to be a positive slope. It has a rise of 3 and a run of 2, so there's your slope filled into that equation, and your 1 is filled in for b. It ends up being a +1, so we'd put that +1 with it. All right, hopefully that worked out for you. You can take a look at your answer and make any fixes you might need to. All right, and the last thing we're going to take a look at, so if we know the equation for a line, okay, like this guy right here, we can put that line on a graph just by using the equation. Okay, so what I need is, well, the numbers are already there. So this 4 is the y-intercept. Okay, so the 4 represents the spot on the graph where the line is going to cross the y-axis. All right, so there's our y-axis. Here's our x-axis. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with my y-intercept, and I'm going to put that on the graph first. So the line would be crossing right there at +4. Okay, and then this 1/2 is the slope, just like when we were writing them. This number next to x is the slope. All right, so that tells me I'm going to be going up 1 and over 2 starting at that point there. Okay, so if I do that and it's a positive slope, so my line should be pointing to the right. So I would want to go up 1 over 2. Okay, so there's my first point, and I could do that again, up 1 over 2. And you can create a few of them if you want to, just to kind of see where your line is going and to make sure it's working. All right, so there we go. We got our points all in a line. We put down our y-intercept, we put down our slope, so we should be able to graph it now. So we'll just draw a line through those points and an arrow extending down so that we know where the line is going to go. Okay, so there we go. We took an equation that was in slope-intercept form, and we made that equation into a line that we could draw on a graph. All right, we'll check out a few more problems so that we can get this skill down a little bit better. Okay, so here's our next problem. We want to graph the equation y equals 3x plus 5. All right, so you want to start right here at your y-intercept, and that is the first point you're going to put down on the graph. Okay, so here's your y-axis, here's your x-axis. So at +5, that is the first point on our graph. That's where the line is going to cross the y-axis. Okay, and then our number next to x is our slope. It isn't a fraction, so what we're going to do is put a 1 underneath of that 3, so that way we can graph where it's going to go. All right, so this is a positive slope, so we want to make sure our line is going to point to the right side. So starting at this 5, we want to go up 3 and to the right 1. So up 1, 2, 3 over 1 is going to put my next point there. Okay, and then if I try to do that again, if I try to go up 3, I kind of run out of space. So what I can do is I can go back to this point here, and I can go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and I can go to the left 1. So that way my points still line up. Okay, and I can do that one more time. Down 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. Okay, there we go. All right, take a look. Your points are lined up. It's going to be graphed the right way. We got our slope of 3 and 1. So let's go ahead and sketch our line in for that. Okay, so it should look like that there. All right, so graphing a line when we're given just the equation. Okay, so this equation here, we're actually starting to use the math for the equation to tell us where the line would go on the graph. All right, so that's what those numbers and that equation mean. It's just the math that tells us where the line appears. Okay, let's try another one here. So start with your y-intercept at the very end. So you have a -7. So that means on your y-axis, you got your y-axis, your x-axis. You're going to be starting down here at -7. Okay, so that's where you're starting. All right, because your y-intercept is a negative number. Okay, and then here's your slope. You have -3 over 2, so it's a negative slope. So you want to make sure your line is going to point to the left. So when you start counting and figure out where your next point is going to go, make sure it's making your line point left when you do that. Okay, so to make this happen, I'm going to go down 3 and then to the right 2. So starting from here, I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3, to the right 2, and that would tell me where my next point is going to be. Okay, right there in that location. All right, and if you take a look, the direction that those points are aligned is pointing to the left, which is what we want, okay, because our slope needs to be negative. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to this point, and I'm going to put a couple more points down. So I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3 over 2. Okay, and that'll get me a point there. So they're still lined up, and I'm going to do that one more time, starting at this one. I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3 over 2. Okay, there we go. So I got 3 or 4 points on there. It lets me know where the straight line is going to go. And now I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in. All right, so our line would be going like that. And we can extend it a little more down the bottom. All right, because the line takes up the whole space on the graph. All right, so we just want to make sure we continue our line through. All right, so there's another example. Now I got one for you guys to try. So see if you can do this on your own. Take that equation and graph the line that matches that equation onto the graph. All right, we'll check your answers here in a minute. Pause the video. Okay, let's take a look and see what you guys came up with. See if you're able to graph a line based on the equation. Okay, oh, it appears like I haven't done this one yet, so we're going to get that done right quick. Okay, so y-intercept at +4, so there's our starting point on the y-axis. And we have a positive slope. We're going to be going up 3 over 5, so 1, 2, 3. It's going to go to the right because it's positive, so I'm going up 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, there's my first point. I can do that one more time. 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there at the very end of the graph. And I'll put one more going off to the left here. So starting here, 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's enough for me to tell where the line is going to go. It's pointing to the right. That's what I want. So we'll just sketch that in. Okay, so there it is going that way and that direction there. All right, so there you go, guys. A little practice working with slope-intercept form. I hope that worked out for you. I got an assignment for you guys to do to kind of practice that skill some more. And then when I come back, we're actually going to get into the textbook, and we're going to start the new stuff that's going to happen in 2-1. All right, so we'll start expanding on what you guys already know a little bit further. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time in class.